Welcome into OutKick the show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I hope all of you are having fantastic Tuesdays wherever you may be across this country, around the world. Today is, what is today? Today is 7 days until the election, 1 full week away. And I'm going to run through a lot of different stories on OutKick. We're going to talk about the latest on the NFL. We're going to talk about Anthony Richardson getting benched, Jon Stewart defending comedy, Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post and the editorial he wrote dealing with the collapse in trust that many media outlets now have to deal with. Ryan Gerdusky made a beeper joke on CNN that has thrown everything into an uproar. He was just on with us, Clay and Buck, and all that and more. But let's go ahead and start with what we learned in the NFL weekend that was, as we typically do on every single Tuesday for all of you out there that are, like me, big NFL fans. And we begin with the Sunday activity. Patriots beat the Jets. The Aaron Rodgers experiment in New York appears to be a failure. The Patriots had lost, I believe, 6 games in a row, get the late touchdown against the Jets. And again, I don't know whether there is a team that would better fit Aaron Rodgers' talents. But right now, the Jets have already fired their coach. They're sitting at, what are they, 2-6, Adam, if I remember correctly, or 2-5. They are a mess of a franchise. Honestly, the entire AFC East, other than the Bills, is basically a smoking disaster. And the Patriots get the win. The Eagles take down the Bengals. Speaking of disasters, Bengals have been really disappointing over the past couple of years. They got to the Super Bowl, beat my Titans. Don't think that I won't remember that forever, on a last-second field goal to go beat the Chiefs then in the AFC Championship game. I'm probably never going to recover from that game. I turned to my young son, and I was like, maybe 20 years until the Titans are in this position again where they're playing with a chance to go to the AFC Championship game. 20 years might be nice because the Titans look like the worst team in the NFL right now. I'll get to that in a moment. Packers get the win over the Jags. Trevor Lawrence experiment not working out. Jordan Love injured. Malik Willis comes in, makes a couple of big throws. Congrats to him. The Lions, I watched this game because I'm a glutton for punishment. The Lions may be the best team in the NFL. The Titans are the worst. I really mean that. I think the Titans are the worst team in the NFL right now. I'm not sure that Callahan is the answer at head coach. They fired a guy in Mike Vrabel who was the NFL Coach of the Year. They lost a couple of early games that Will Levis gave away. Now it's just kind of an all-systems failure. The Titans can't even cover a kick return. They were letting Khalif Raymond run all over the field, just absolutely abuse them. Former Titan, of course, Khalif Raymond. Falcons go on the road, beat the Bucs. Bucs are crumbling. Tough situation right now with the Bucs, with injuries to both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Cardinals beat the Dolphins, but the Dolphins actually have a pulse with Tua back in. Unfortunately for the Dolphins, they're too far back now. Again, we were talking about how bad the AFC East is. The Dolphins even managed to lose to the Titans without Tua. The Browns got past the Ravens. Congratulations, Jameis Winston, for getting the win and basically making a lot of us who have said for some time, why isn't Deshaun Watson benched, look like geniuses, because the Browns went to Joe Flacco last year and started winning as soon as Deshaun Watson was out for the season. Now they've gone to Jameis Winston. I feel like they'll start winning because Deshaun Watson's a disaster. Jameis Winston's a better option. Texans hold on against the Colts. The Colts have announced, if you missed it, in the wake of this game, Anthony Richardson said that he was too tired and needed to ask out for a play, which is kind of unheard of. And there's a lot of, I think, nervousness about Anthony Richardson. I know he got injured last year and he still hasn't started very many games, but he doesn't seem to be putting everything together. This guy is extremely talented. I said that he was raw if you watched him play with the Florida Gators, but the way that he could play at his apex in college suggested that he had another level to go to, and he's not getting there right now. And Joe Flacco now has been brought in to bench the Colts starter, Anthony Richardson. I think he's probably the better option right now. Chargers whip the Saints. Bills Again, Josh Allen, second best quarterback in the league. Patrick Mahomes, clearly the best quarterback in the league. But what Josh Allen continues to do makes it hard for me to root against the Bills and also hard to root against the Chiefs. We need like a real bad guy. I like the Chiefs. I like their organization, even though they keep winning. The Commanders, last second, I hope you guys saw the early celebration that was coming from one of the Bears corners. And I actually got my kids, all three of my boys, and I played that video for them where you can see him like facing the crowd and waving and celebrating. And then he rushes all the way over to where the Hail Mary is being thrown. He's got his back turned when the ball is snapped, runs all the way over to where the pass is coming down and like literally pops it up in the air and allows the touchdown to happen behind him. Huge win for the Commanders. Jaden Daniels, credit. That's a 65, nearly 70-yard pass in the air. Found a way to get the win. The Commanders have been one of the biggest failures in the NFL in terms of getting a bunch of wins. And they are rolling right now thanks to Jaden Daniels. Broncos. Are the Broncos actually a decent team? I think that's a question that you have to start asking. I know that they just beat Carolina, but they're sitting at 5-3. You're starting to see a little bit of growth in the young quarterback, Bo Nix. Threw for almost 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. I rushed for another touchdown. I think you got to be kind of optimistic if you're a Denver Bronco fan. Chiefs get the win over the Raiders. Nobody can beat the Chiefs. 49ers get the win over the Cowboys. And then last night, Russell Wilson magic. Steelers are now sitting at 6-2. All Mike Tomlin does is win, and Russell Wilson looks like a dramatic improvement over Justin Fields. Okay, I mentioned the Cowboys continuing to collapse and the 49ers getting the win over the Cowboys. After that game, Nick Bosa came out during the post-game interview with Kittle and with Purdy, and he held up a Make America Great Again hat on NBC, and it has spawned a complete crazy reaction from many of the usual suspects out there. So let me talk about Nick Bosa for a moment. Nick Bosa, this is kind of a comedic thing. He held up the hat. He shared on Instagram that he thought that he wanted to make sure that everybody saw the hat. Nick Bosa has been a Trump guy for some time, and it's not really a shock that he is voting for Donald Trump. Now, the usual suspects at USA Today and the New York Times and the usual suspects on the left wing in sports have reacted with outrage and acted out like this is a huge activity, huge issue. Here's the deal. Nobody has any issue with individual players deciding that they want to endorse candidates. Nobody has any issue with, in general, everybody having the right to support whomever they would like. What typically we have an issue with, and I'm speaking on my behalf here, some of you may sign on to this, some of you may disagree with it, is within the context of the game itself, politics, in my opinion, should not exist in sports, because why would you alienate half of the American sporting fan base? Probably more than that, because I think more sports fans are voting Trump than voting Kamala. My general take. So, if Nick Bosa had decided during the game or during the national anthem that he was going to take a knee because he wanted to protest anyone who was going to vote for Kamala Harris in the 2024 presidential election, I would say, while I agree with Bosa and I'm also voting for Trump, I don't think that is a smart decision for him to make during the national anthem, taking a knee and refusing to stand for it because you disagree with Kamala Harris being the nominee of the Democrat Party. I would say it. And if, and by the way, that's for any politics. If Nick Bosa took a knee because he had a particular opinion on abortion, or because he had a particular opinion on what the tax rate should be, or whether gay marriage should be legal, I don't think that's smart. I think the national anthem is a time where Americans can come together before the game starts and all thank the Lord that we are fortunate enough to live in the greatest country that's ever existed. It is a moment of unity before both teams throw themselves at each other and try to win the game by whatever means are necessary. Okay. After the game, I really struggle to have an issue to think that if a player had decided in a post-game interview to hold up a hat saying that he was with Kamala, that I would have any issue with that at all. Game's over. That person has the right to give their opinion. And right now, lots of coaches are speaking out aggressively. I've seen Greg Popovich in his post-game press conference. I've seen Doc Rivers in his press conferences. Doc Rivers made a video for Kamala Harris encouraging people to vote for her. Steph Curry spoke at the DNC. Steve Kerr spoke at the DNC. There are lots of athletes out there that have decided to endorse Kamala. Some athletes have decided to endorse Trump. So what? Like, they have a right to have their opinions too. I don't think in the context of the game itself that should be occurring. I think that would be a bad look for the NFL, for the NBA, for Major League Baseball, whatever it is. And the attempt to make it equivalent what Colin Kaepernick did for the San Francisco 49ers with what Nick Bosa did, I think is crazy. And I think it would be a bad move if the NFL decided they were going to fine Nick Bosa for flashing the MAGA hat in the same way that I think it would be a bad move if they decided to fine a player for having a Kamala Walz hat or whatever else. Everybody has the right to make whatever statement they want. I just think it should occur outside of the game itself. Now, I thought it was funny when the Texas Tech kicker made the field goal. Adam, look up exactly what the situation was in the game when he lifted his shirt and showed MAGA written on the T-shirt underneath. I think that was, a post-game celebration based on the video that I saw. I didn't break down the Texas Tech game in earnest, but let me go ahead and I'll look that up myself because I know it went mega viral. I was raising money at the Brett Boyer Foundation, so I didn't see that game happen in real time. I saw that it had gone mega viral, and I guess that was not like the final end of the game scenario because it looks like TCU actually won that game on an 85-yard pass. So I don't know where exactly that celebration was. I think it's probably not that smart to do during the game. If it was after the game, you want to rip off your pads and you got a MAGA shirt on and you want to do a cartwheel and you want to celebrate the fact that you're voting for Donald Trump, go for it. So that's my take in general. I don't think that's a very difficult take. I think it's probably one that 80 or 90% of people would agree with. I think most football fans are probably tired of seeing all the different ads that run during NFL and college football broadcast and are ready to just get back to that scenario. Fake field goal TD. Okay. Super cool. Congratulations to him. But unless I had won the game outright, I don't know that I'd be lifting my shirt to show anything. But again, he's a college kid. I don't know that it's some sort of massive failure of the process. Probably most people at Texas Tech are voting for Trump. And like I said, I think most football fans are voting Trump over Kamala. But when Trump wins, and I do think he's going to win, I think this will all end, and I would encourage the NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, by and large, to do what most of them have been doing right now, which is say, hey, vote however you think it makes the most sense. I thought that what Patrick Mahomes said and Caitlin Clark said when they were asked how they were going to vote, good answer, intelligent answer, why alienate half of your fan base? And so that is kind of my take on this in general. Now, a couple of other things that are out there. I have criticized Washington Post owner Jeff Bezos for what he's allowed the Washington Post to become in the past. But I think refusing to endorse a presidential candidate and the editorial that he published yesterday evening on the Washington Post website, and I presume in the print edition of the newspaper, is 100% the right move, and I give him credit for that. And let me take you back a little bit. I love newspapers. I absolutely love reading print newspapers. I'm going to be the last guy on the planet walking on to airplanes with like 5 or 6 different print newspapers to read. I have loved print newspapers all over the world. When I travel, I buy print newspapers. I still like to talk with people out there who will listen to me about how much I enjoyed buying all the newspapers, traveling around in Australia, reading all of those. The Australian newspaper, by the way, is incredible. Didn't even know it existed until I was over there. Fabulous read. When I travel and I'm at the airport, let's say, for instance, in New York, I will buy the New York Post. I will buy the New York Times. I will buy the Wall Street Journal. I will load up. When I'm in Washington, D.C., I'll buy the Washington Post. And I was a longtime subscriber to the Washington Post during college, all 4 years. I would read every newspaper. They were trying to get kids to read newspapers back in the day, and we could get the USA Today, the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal for free every day, and I would read all 4 newspapers every day. I still read Washington Post. I'm a subscriber, New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal every day, and I get the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times delivered to my house. Okay, that's all background. The Washington Post used to be a great newspaper. And I wrote about this in American Playbook, and I'm a student and like to learn about the history of media. And the Washington Post lost its way after Trump won in 2016. I think they were wrong to put "Democracy Dies in Darkness" at the top of the newspaper. I think they were wrong to treat Donald Trump as some sort of existential threat to the country. I think they were wrong to become a partisan hack of a newspaper when, in my experience, during the 90s, the late 90s, they covered Bill Clinton aggressively in a negative way, just like they did Richard Nixon. I think that newspapers should speak truth to power and hold accountable people accountable in a rational way in both directions, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. And what we have seen, and Jeff Bezos laid this out quite clearly, is there has been a total and complete collapse in the credibility of the American media. In particular, media since the last several years has utterly collapsed. And I'm going to grab what Bezos said, and I'm going to read a couple of the opinions that he laid out. And he said, and I talked about this on the program, Gallup, in the latest Gallup poll, only about 30% of Americans trust the news media. And he says, in order, I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs. Lack of credibility isn't unique to the Washington Post. Our brethren newspapers have the same issue. It's a problem not only for media, but also for the nation. While I do not and will not push my personal interest, I won't allow this paper to stay on autopilot and fade into irrelevance, not without a fight. Too important. Now more than ever, the world needs a credible, trusted, independent voice, and where better for that voice to originate than the capital city of the most important country in the world? To win this fight, we're going to have to exercise new muscles. Some changes will be a return to the past, such as not endorsing presidential candidates, and some will be new inventions. Criticism will be part and parcel of anything new. This is the way of the world. None of this will be easy, but it will be worth it. And I think he's right. You can't have the Washington Post turn into a left-wing fan rag of the Democrat Party because it destroys the overall brand itself and also just fairness in journalism. And let me share something with you. The 250,000 people who have canceled their Washington Post subscriptions, and I am a subscriber, so I am still subscribed. That's 10% of the overall subscribers. You're telling on yourself. You are saying that you don't want actual news. You want left-wing propaganda. You are paying basically for a fan site like I pay, or you may have paid for Rivals 24/7 or on 3 fan subscription sites in the past. That's what's going on here. And so you're telling on yourself, they didn't endorse my chosen candidate, and therefore I will not pay for their product, is a petty and petulant, childlike response. And the reality is, Jeff Bezos is so rich that he can afford to run the Washington Post losing money, and it doesn't really change his overall wealth. But it does raise the question of what in the world has gone on that the Washington Post, which used to be one of the greatest newspapers anywhere, and also the New York Times, have so lost their way that a huge percentage of the public doesn't trust their reporting or even care very much about it anymore. I think that's a fundamental failure. And there is a report that Bezos wants more conservative writers at the Washington Post. And that makes sense to me. If your goal is to give the news to the majority of America, then what in the world is going on? And let me just hammer this. If everybody has the same opinion at a newspaper, you're going to be flawed. And let me hammer this home a little bit. There is no right-wing equivalent of the New York Times or the Washington Post. And I do think that if the Post and the Times don't evolve, there will be a huge media opportunity there. Now, you can say the Wall Street Journal, but the Wall Street Journal really, and I love it, is focused more on the day-to-day business world than it is purely politics, right? It's the business Bible, so to speak, of Wall Street. It's not really super partisan. It's kind of a little bit right of center from a business perspective. Probably aligns a lot with my views, but there isn't anything like the New York Times or the Washington Post in major media today from a print publication, from a newspaper perspective. Now, the New York Post, OutKick, there are assets that Fox owns that have huge audiences, but I feel like there is an opportunity out there to do the equivalent of the New York Times and the Washington Post, just from a centrist perspective, a little bit right of center, because they've gone so far left wing in the way that they cover the media, that I feel like there's an opportunity there. And my point on where the opportunity would lie is, like, just look at television news. Fox News has, on many days, the equivalent of CNN and MSNBC's audience combined, and still no real major competition in cable. But there isn't a Fox News in a newspaper. I would also add that OutKick is basically Fox News for sports, in that we cover basically the vast majority of the American sporting public in a way that's centrist. And then there's a fight on the 20% of people who are super left wing. It's kind of extraordinary to me that we still don't have a lot of competition. Okay, a couple of other things that are out there, but credit to Jeff Bezos. I may need to write a longer form piece because I do think it's emblematic after the election of the world that we have now created. Jon Stewart, I give credit to him, on his show defended the comedian Tony Hinchcliffe, who is a roast comedian that appeared at the Madison Square Garden rally and has become somehow a huge focal point because he roasted Puerto Rico. Now, look, I love Puerto Rico. I lived in the Caribbean. I've spent a lot of time in San Juan. I've spent a decent amount of time on the island of Puerto Rico. I would be fine living there one day. That's how much I like it. But a roast comedian makes fun of everything. Now, you can argue, why did the Trump team decide to have a roast comedian speak at their Madison Square Garden event? But this is a guy who showed up and ripped Tom Brady to shreds. This is what he does. So Jon Stewart rightly pointed out that would be like having Beyonce. If you don't let a roast comedian do a roast, that would be like having Beyonce at a rally and not letting her sing, which of course is what Kamala Harris did. But to me, there's no story here. Comedians make jokes. Sometimes people get offended by the jokes that comedians make, but they're jokes. They're designed to make us laugh. And I didn't think there was anything remotely controversial within the roast comic concept of anything that he said. And so this is an example of faux rage, and I'll just continue to say it. Republicans should be the party that likes jokes. I wrote it in one of my chapters in this book. Like laughter, like jokes. And I tie it in with what just happened to Ryan Girdusky on CNN. We just had Ryan Girdusky on Clay and Buck. He got fired by CNN for making a joke about Mehdi Hassan, who is a left-wing apologist for Hamas, for Hezbollah, an anti-Israel media figure that was considered to be so anti-Israel that he was let go by, this is kind of crazy to think about, let go by MSNBC, brought on to CNN. He's calling all the Trump people who went to the rally at Madison Square Garden Nazis, which is crazy talk. But the reality is Ryan Girdusky just fired back with a joke like, I hope your beeper doesn't explode, which is a joke about Hezbollah having all their beepers explode. And now it doesn't directly connect to Hamas or the Palestinians, but it's a funny one-off line that is certainly acceptable when you are being called a Hitler supporter, basically on CNN, as the discussion on that panel was designed to do. And this whole idea of, oh my goodness, people said something mean to me. I can't believe what was said to me on television. Like, I'm just not in that game, okay? I've done live television for 10 years now, whatever the math is on it, a little bit over 10 years. You don't know if you're good on television, what exactly you're going to say from one moment to the next. I don't know what I'm going to say on this program from one moment to the next. I'm not even sure exactly what topics I'm going to get to. And that's what makes live television good. I've been on Fox News a ton. I've been on Fox Sports a ton. I've been on CNN and also got banned on CNN for saying that I support the First Amendment and boobs, which was the number one trending topic 7 years ago. It's probably the best thing that's ever happened in my career. And that's what I told Ryan Girdusky. Just stand by it. CNN, it's acceptable to call Trump voters Hitler Nazis, but it's not acceptable to fire back with a beeper joke about someone who has regularly attacked Israel and has spoken in a supportive fashion of both Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran in the past. So I don't think he should be banned. But I'm not surprised CNN did it. We don't cancel people on Clay and Buck. We don't cancel people at OutKick. And so I was happy to have him on the show. Speaking of the insanity of calling Trump Hitler or saying that Trump is a modern-day Nazi, they polled voters in Israel. This is from the New York Post. And they found 2/3 of Israeli voters would vote for Donald Trump. Kind of throws a bit of a wrinkle on the Donald Trump is a Nazi argument, which they are trying to make on the left right now. If Israel were voting for United States president, Trump would win in Israel by around 30 points. About 2 out of every 3 voters in Israel, according to the Post poll of Israeli voters that they wrote about, would be voting for Donald Trump. Is it regularly the case that Jewish people vote for Nazis? I tend to think that those are the antithesis of each other. But it is very, very funny to think about, hey, Israel, if they could vote, if Israel were a United States state, it would vote for Donald Trump by an overwhelming majority, kind of like the state of Alabama or Tennessee or Utah or Wyoming will be voting for Trump. That's how red Israel would be. It destroys the argument that in any way Donald Trump is a Nazi or fascist or Hitler-like on its face, and anyone with a functional brain understands this. Finally, Tim Walz is a disaster of a pick at vice president. It looks like Trump is surging in Pennsylvania right now. Maybe it would be helpful if you were Kamala Harris to have the very popular governor of Pennsylvania as your running mate instead of the moron from Minnesota, which is what she's got right now. But Tim Walz was brought in to try to appeal to football fans, and so far he has utterly failed to do that. on Sunday they played Madden, Walz and AOC, and the Walz account tweeted that AOC runs a mean pick six, which is not a play. And if it were, I'd love to run it because if I could get a pick six, I would be very happy to get it. It's not something that anyone would ever say who is an actual football fan. My suspicion is this is the problem that Kamala has in general, is that her campaign is primarily filled with women who don't understand football at all. I don't think this was something that Tim Walz would have tweeted from his account. But yesterday, he tried to argue that in the form of the election, it was a tie game. They had the ball, and they were going to go down and score and win the game. The problem is, he said, it doesn't matter whether we're getting an inch or a yard at a time. Actually, it does, because if you get an inch at a time, then after 4 plays, you've gained 4 inches and the other team gets the ball. It's actually a thoroughly disaster of a drive. And if you gain a yard at a time, after 4 plays, the other team gets the ball too, and you end up probably losing the game. So Tim Walz, brought in as this brilliant football coach that they have tried to identify him as, is unable to even make basic football analogies on Sunday or Monday, which is why overwhelming majorities of football fans are going to be voting for Donald Trump, and why I believe Donald Trump is going to be the next president of the United States. Now, let me give you a couple of data points here. We have got Trump now taking a 12-point lead in Florida. We have got Trump taking a 125,000 plus vote lead in Arizona, a 38,000 lead in Nevada, most recent numbers that I have seen, and a 30,000-ish lead in North Carolina. Significant because usually Democrats enter Election Day with substantial leads based on early voting and banked votes. That has not occurred so far this year. And as a result, the absolute latest gambling odds are Trump has taken his biggest lead ever over Kamala Harris. He is now a 67% favorite in the gambling markets. If you disagree with this, you can basically triple your money by voting on Kamala Harris now. And if you are curious, as I am, to know how the swing states are looking, these are the 7 most competitive states. Trump has a 7-point lead in Michigan, 54-47. That is, he has a 54% chance of winning that state. North Carolina, which was Kamala's big focal point in the South, the one state that Trump won that she thought she could flip. Trump now is a 73% favorite to win North Carolina. In Pennsylvania, Trump has hit an all-time high today, 63% chance that he wins Pennsylvania, as the absentee ballot numbers are nowhere near for Democrats what they were in 2020. I mentioned that Trump had around a 38,000 vote lead in Nevada. He is now a 67% favorite to flip Nevada to his side. Georgia, Trump is a 74% favorite to win. Arizona, Trump is a 75% favorite to win. And Wisconsin, Trump is a 60-point favorite to win. So right now, it looks like Kamala Harris's most likely and potentially only path to victory is to sweep Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. If she loses any one of those 3 states, Donald Trump is going to be the next president of the United States. I am confident in that. The numbers are great. Keep voting early. Make sure that you don't give up. 7 days to go. Sprint through the finish line. Trump is leading. Keep growing that margin in the battleground states. DBAP, unless you need to SBAP. I am Clay Travis, and this has been OutKick, the show.